next couple of years. So that reduction would be an increase to the grand list, and those numbers were provided by the assessor's office, and you'll see those at Forest Manor and Park View on page GF3 of the package. As far as the revenues are concerned, we didn't change anything with collection assumptions. We're still going at 98.4%. One thing that we did include was $500,000 for the new tiered pilot increase. The numbers that we've seen preliminarily could be as high as 1.8 million. But rather than build a plan with 1.8 million in it, thought it was better to go a little more conservative. All other state revenues are held constant. There are no state restructuring funds in the plan. ARP revenues were included. Again, this is fiscal 22. After consulting with Senator Blumenthal's offices, we've got some modest growth on some of the other lines, licenses and permits. We are expecting to see go up again as people come out of this pandemic and start going back out into the world. Parking tags, we have an initiative within the city to monetize various areas as far as parking goes. And the legal instrument fees is the line that you'll see is the greatest increase. That is the new conveyance fees that were unanimously approved by the council last night. Investment revenues we're holding low. We're keeping that at roughly 1% of the general fund balance. And the residual equity transfers, that's the city portion of the police special duty that had been depressed due to COVID and functions not being done, construction being halted on some things. We're holding that constant. I do expect to see some sort of an increase in there, but we're holding that constant at roughly 250. In prior years, it had been as high as 350. But again, err on the side of conservatism. The transfer line from the sewer fund, that continues to drop off, and that is specifically related to the sewer fund reimbursing the general fund as the general fund pays off the old clean water debt. So those numbers are actual based on the debt service schedules. Salaries, we reflect contractual increases, so 1% or 2%. We have a new hire in the police department, as well as in 23 and one in 24. And unless otherwise identified, all departmental lines are using a 2% annual increase to keep up with inflation. Software maintenance costs, we're growing a little higher than that at 5%. We're using a 7% increase on the health insurance for the partnership plan. That is in the general fund. For the Allentown fund, who has not moved to the partnership plan yet, we used a 12 to 13% assumption on that. The police pension contribution was off the last valuation provided by Milliman. They are in the process of working up a new valuation for me. And the debt service has been calculated using the individual line items within the capital plan, applying a projected usable life to that, and working out the payment schedule from that. So extreme detail with that. The only other line that you'll see is in the contingency other area. There was a line item as a placeholder for the outsourcing of the ADP costs. Going forward in 23 and on, those will be reported in the personnel department. And I think that covers most of the major assumptions, Kim.
Thank you, Frank. Any questions?
So So what is still outstanding as far as something that we don't have definite numbers on?
Well, it's a financial plan, so there are no definite numbers on any of them, but the actuarial valuations we're still waiting for. So we used the last numbers that we had from them.
For the fire, right?
For the fire and the police pension.
Okay.
And are we still, is it still kind of under construction as far as having a plan regarding the use of these one-time revenues if they don't come to fruition as, I guess, expected in the budget?
Well, there are no one-time revenues in the out years, just in the fiscal '22, and I think that was already passed.
So, a couple things. So with respect to the funding, the local fiscal recovery fund, Treasury did issue guidance yesterday, and our OPM team is in the process of crunching the numbers. They provided the methodology to the state for the non-entitlement unit. And remind me, do you fall under entitlement or non-entitlement?
I believe we're entitlement.
Okay. Second clarification is, they did make it clear that Treasury has opted to utilize the language in the law to only allocate 50% of your award. How much do you assume in fiscal year '22 for our revenues, and what is your total award?
We used 1.57, and I believe the total award for the city was
Almost 19 million.
19 million?
We get half. We're gonna get half.
All right, so from a one-time revenue perspective for fiscal '22, your assumptions, I don't see any concerns there. And then, I guess if it gets to Steve's question about one-time revenues, or revenues at this point we're not with utilized, right? The ones that I would identify are the tier pilot.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you to please quantify for us the Haven project and how much in revenue are you anticipating for fiscal years '25 and '26, right? So that's the year in which you indicate the new revenues. And then the sale of the 3 schools, you're anticipating some amount of property tax revenue that would also bolster your tax goal. Those are the 3, and the rest of the committee can certainly weigh in. Those are the 3 areas where we have some assumptions in here that obviously we'll have to monitor whether they materialize, and that should allow us to evaluate the kind of level of risk, if you will. So, tell me what you have there in those particular estimates. Tier pilot, clearly you're at the 500K.
Correct.
But what about the Haven project and the 3 schools?
The Haven project and the 3 schools, I'm gonna have to pull up the file. I don't have the calculation here in front of me. So it flows through with the grand list improvements. Let's see if I have.
Well, while the CFO is doing that, if there are other questions that you have.
I don't know if this is the place for it, but in the past, there had been a list of efficiency initiatives, and I'm wondering if there are any for the long term. I'm looking at this document as a critical document to kind of map out your exit runway. At least the key elements are that you're not running a deficit, and I think this answers that question. I assume, but maybe you can confirm the status of your the bond, your credit rating. I assume it's either improved or stayed the same. And the real thing I think we ought to talk about is sustainability, which in the statute is sort of vague. I think this group with OPM's guidance ought to say what we ought to be looking for. But I guess, and I've got some other questions, but we'll wait for that. But is there an efficiency initiative that's built out here, or you finished with all those?
Did we finish with all that?
We haven't finished with all of them, but there's other things that we will bring forward.
This Frank's not
We
here.
can't hear you if somebody's speaking.
Here, I don't know if you can get out.
You want me to talk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Having some sound issues still, if someone is trying to.
Okay, no, well, Frank left to go get the file, so it's Michael Mylone and I here, so Michael is going to talk, so I just wanted to let you know, Frank's back, as far as the efficiencies.
There are continuing, let me just get a chair here, excuse me. I'm out of the picture. Okay.
Mr. Mylone,
Okay.
you still want to see workers' comp costs increasing, so you can take your time until you're done.
Yeah, well, it would be a lawsuit because I'm not paid by the town, the city, so I go the other route. Anyway,
Whatever you do, we'll have that contract.
and I'm sorry, as the oldest person here, I'm going to forget a bunch of stuff, but so this is off the top of our head. One of the things that the mayor is going to be doing is she's hiring a new personnel director, hopefully effective July 1st. And there are a number of continuing items that have to be addressed as part of the consultant's report that was developed about a year and a half ago. I can't itemize them for you right now, but a lot of them affect the operational issues that were raised and bringing them to another level. But the other thing too is the incorporation of all of the benefit administration into the personnel department for the first time. And that was a big issue because it was pretty fragmented and it was costing the city a lot of money because there was no centralized oversight of what was happening. The other thing, so a lot is going to be in the personnel area. Again, a lot's been done, but there's a lot more that needs to be done and couldn't be done because they simply didn't have the staffing. The mayor will now have a benefits administrator, actually it's a payroll benefits coordinator, who will be able to devote more of her time to benefits administration. And in October, they will be hiring a human resources generalist, which was one of the recommendations of the study. So they'll have the staff in place, hopefully, to address some of the things that were put off until they had people in place that they needed. The other thing that obviously will be going on is in the pension and benefits area. We're working with the 3 fire districts on their pension plans. Actually, one of them has already made some changes for level funding. And then the other 2, Allentown and First District, will be having actuarial evaluations, one this summer, one the following summer. And at the request of Julian, we did bring up some issues with the actuary, and they are looking at some amortization changes, obviously some interest rate changes, and the likelihood of being able to develop a stream of expenditures that at worst is level funded, so that it will at least create future consistency in the expectations of what has to be contributed, and you won't have the volatility that we've seen in the past. We're in the process of doing this energy performance contract project, and it's hoped that these projects will start in September. We expect efficiencies from this initiative, but the biggest thing is that we're going to be able to do, I don't know, maybe $8-9 million in projects without having to use borrowed funds or city or Board of Education funds. The savings is guaranteed to pay for the projects. The other thing, let me think, we're working on some initiatives relative to Social Security payments for part-time employees, which the law would allow us to switch to a deferred comp plan and not have to make Social Security contributions. I'm trying to think. You know what, I don't want to hold up the meeting, and I'm sorry, and I don't want to have a lot of blank spaces. Those are the things that come to mind now, and also as we're going through the 5-year plan, we'll probably see some opportunities for some other initiatives that we haven't provided in the past, but also some of the initiatives that have been identified in the past that are ongoing and continuing, like the human resources one, for example. So for right now, that's all that comes to mind without having any documents in front of me, but I could certainly put something together for the mayor, which he could get transmitted up to the MARB and OPM within the week.
Thank you. On the fire department, you know, when you look at the mill rate, and you add on the fire department's mill rates, which I remember from the past, you're very close to 50 mills. I guess two questions flew from that. We've been waiting for a while for the fire departments to kind of come up with a plan to try to lower that mill rate. It's taken a very long time. I understand trying to get folks to work together is difficult, but you know, that is a concern. I'm just wondering on the status of that and if that will be incorporated into the plan, because quite frankly, from a sustainability point of view, that, in my mind at least, and I'd like to hear what others say, is an area of risk.
Mr. White,
Advocating for the CDC fund, also the long-term sustainability of the pension fund. And we had been talking about that for some time. And we would be remiss to not include in that risk analysis, and I do agree that we should, as we're thinking about this 5-year plan in the context of West Haven exiting and being able to sustain it, we would be remiss not to ask the city to really incorporate into this plan how they're going to ensure the solvency of the 1 or 2 pension funds that were of concern.
yeah,
Over to you, Stephen, to comment
Okay,
on both components of that.
this is-
And if you're jumping in.
Yeah, I was. Mr. White, I do not recall that our plan was for them to reduce the mill rate, as I thought that they, when we looked at analysis in the past, in order to cover what had not been funded in pension plans, the plan from the external firefighter study was showing that they would need increases in order to increase their contribution. So we just need to be careful of that.
this is Michael. If I could just respond to Mr. White's question. Under the memorandum of agreement, the city, the mayor has to submit by May 30th, which is Sunday, a plan relative to the recommendations of the SC Fire Study. So this Friday, you will be receiving such a report from the mayor. And the key elements of it are, one, to address as best as possible the pension and OPEB unfunded liabilities. And the two things that the fire districts have done and plan to do, and one is they're making advanced funding commitments to the OPEB and to the pension plan. But more importantly, one of the 3 pension plans, West Shore, had their actuarial study done last year and came up with a 30-year level funding program, which they can afford and they can sustain based on their current situation and their situation going out a couple of years. Correspondingly, Allentown is coming up for their valuation in July of this year, and Julian and Kim have already requested some information from us on that front. I know that the actuary is going to extend the amortization schedule beyond the 12 years that currently exists, which will save some money, but they also probably will increase or decrease the interest rate. So there will be a plan developed that hopefully will sustain, or at least it can be sustained by the Allentown District. They're currently meeting their actuarial funded requirement. They are currently paying significant additional dollars and plan to for the next 5 years as a supplement to that contribution. Correspondingly, they're doing that for their OPEB. The first fire district doesn't have their actuarial evaluation done until July of '22. And in discussions with the actuary, they are going to look at a couple of options for that plan. One would be changing the amortization table, but they also recommended that they look at the level funding approach that they did for the West Shore Fire District. So there's going to be a lot of attention on the two remaining plans, fire pension plans, to bring about savings, and according to the actuary, they're confident that they will have various options to make that happen. Currently, all three of them are meeting their annual contributions. Two of them, Allentown and Center Fire District, are making additional contributions, and the only reason that West Shore isn't is because they have the level funding program in place, and so there is no need to. And then also what we're doing, but not as far advanced, is they're all making additional contributions to OPEB, and they're all working with the same actuary on their OPEB unfunded liabilities, so there's some consistency and uniformity in the way they're approaching it. Relative to the mill rate, and I'm sorry, I should have started by saying that this report that you're going to get on Friday also includes a three-year plan, a three-year fiscal plan for the three fire districts. That was one of the requirements of the memorandum of agreement. So you will have a similar document for the fire districts that you currently are looking at for the city's general fund and sewer department and Allentown Fire District. So there will be a three-year fiscal plan, and in that, Mr. White, there will be obviously mill rate estimates going out 3 years, and they will be combined with the city's mill rate so that you could see, one, what the separate mill rates are for the fire districts, and then on another line you can see what the total combined mill rate is for the residents in each of those districts, both motor vehicle and real estate and personal property. And based on the preliminary information we have, it does not look like that those rates will go up more than about 3.5% over 2 years. So the average after this year is about 1.5 to 1.6% for the total mill rate increase in each of those three districts. And that was helped a lot, obviously, by the recent revaluation. And those comparisons are based on the revaluation base. They don't go back beyond that because it would distort the comparison. So I have to say that in our work with the districts, they've really accomplished a lot. There's a lot more to accomplish, but I think that for now they're on the right track, and their projections for the near term, the next 3 years, look very realistic and very conservative, but I'll leave that to you to judge when you get those documents. I mean, for one thing, they're all likely to get state aid. The two independent districts will not budget that as revenue because of a problem they had in the past where they budgeted a pilot payment that didn't materialize. So I know, looking at their revenues, that they're understated, and it's all a function of how much more they get under the pilot payment for motor vehicles. So I think that there's some positive things happening there. Still a lot more that needs to be done, but they have a plan to deal with the outstanding issues, and that will be conveyed to you through the mayor at the end of this week.
Thank you, Michael. One question on OPEB. My understanding is that is not subject to any kind of audit. It's, at least Allentown, and from what I gathered, both the other districts have implemented some kind of advanced funding. Is there any sense of whether that the OPEB piece will be sustainable in at least the midterm?
I can't tell you that with total and absolute certainty because we haven't been able, because of time, to just get our arms around their benefit programs like we did with the city's program. On the surface, it certainly appears that way, but I can't say it with total confidence until we really can dig into it and understand what the costs are and what the potential options might be for changing the plan structure.
Okay, one final question, and maybe this is for later, but is the mayor and Frank comfortable that a mill rate in, for the length of this plan, a total mill rate in the area of 50 mills is sustainable, that there won't be a taxpayer revolt somewhere
Well,
in the future?
I think, all taxpayers object to, increasing taxes. And again, you can't look at the mill rate on its own. It's a combination of the mill rate and the grand list. If we can get the grand list growing, which is part of what the new economic planner is going to be doing, then that in and of itself will reduce the overall mill rate.
And I just wanted to add, I agree with what Frank is saying, and we're gonna do our best. We're looking for other sources of revenue as opposed to just pushing the mill rate. So no, I'm not comfortable with it being up around 50 mills, and we're gonna do everything we can, because as Frank had said before, this is a plan. We're gonna do our best to deal with the plan, but if opportunity comes that there's a different way of raising revenue that's allowed, and we are going to explore every possibility so that we don't have to push the mill rate.
To that point, obviously the mill rate changes just for the general fund are very modest. It would be very helpful when you receive your fire pension plan is for us to layer on the anticipated mill rate increases in the fund for us to gauge the total impact to the city. And to that point, Frank, were you able to identify the economic growth that you're aiming for? How much is that? Because that is mill rate increase avoidance, which is the right way to go.
Yeah.
So back to the 3 schools and the Haven project.
Yep, so for the 3 schools, the impact in fiscal '24, just taking the grand list impact at the mill rate, is, oops, bear with me here. So for the 3 schools in fiscal '24, the number is $53,000. It's the actual $52,215. In fiscal '25, there is an additional $160,245. And then, of course, that number would remain in fiscal '26. For the Haven project, the demolition, we're expecting to lose $102,630. That's the impact of that grand list change. In fiscal '24 and '25, the number, let's see, in '24, it grows by $139,240, and in fiscal '25, $320,490. Now, those are modest numbers. The appraiser thinks that the actual value of the project is going to be higher than that, but better safe than sorry. The Forest Manor, the impact on that in '23, '24, and '25 is an additional $23,000 every year. And the Park View, it averages roughly $15,000 per year. So overall, we're looking at '23, a reduction of the revenues by $65,348. In '24, the number goes to a positive $229,354. In '25, $519,505, and in '26, $15,171. And again, those are incremental year over year.
So by the time you hit 26, it's about, call it $800,000 cumulative, right? If you add in all the total amount of benefit to the grand list for all of those projects.
700,000.
Okay. All right, so, breaking this up into, from a revenue perspective, we want municipalities pushing for economic development, so I think you're moving in the right direction by looking at the opportunities within your town. Obviously, to the extent to which you're working with MARB, we'll be monitoring the feasibility of these projects, but you should be pushing to take your available properties and take them back on the tax roll. It appears that your mill rate assumptions are reasonable, and if you've had to do some tweaking, at least your starting point is very modest, and each year you're at, at the highest, you're at a 0.8 mill increase, and many of those years, you're at a, 0.2 or thereabouts. So from a mill rate perspective, I feel very comfortable what you've presented. The assumptions with respect to Uni 8, I think you've baked in some conservatism around this year pilot, which is an appropriate course, and we will hopefully know in the next 2 weeks, giving you a little bit more certainty and the MARB more certainty on that component. With respect to the expenditure side of the house, I will note that you have pretty decent contingencies built in, and we're ranging from 1.5 million to 4.6 million. So you base it cushion, if you will, in the event some of these assumptions on development don't materialize, and then also on the extent that your general fund pension costs are reevaluated. I think the committee would benefit from hearing from you if you believe any of these assumptions surrounding pension are going to need to be tweaked. I heard of a couple of areas where the long-term interest rate of return might need to be reevaluated. That puts some costs back on the city too that would need to be considered. I will say that I am pleased to hear that we're going to get a fire pension plan, and I look forward to the committee reviewing that in further detail, because as you're hearing feedback, I think our role now for our municipality exiting is to assess the areas of risk, many of which we worked on during the past few years, and ensure that there's a plan to mitigate those risks. And so I look forward to seeing that. And finally, I do think it's important for us to look at where you'll be from a fund balance perspective. And I believe that our package should include fund balance projections. And I will ask Mr. Julian or the city to please walk us through where we expect to be from a fund balance perspective. We want to make good fiscal principles. You want to have reserves for when the surprise hits. So, Julian, do you want to walk us through that, or would you like the city to do so?
I think either one could. I think that the tables are in a familiar format. So with the general fund projections, you can see in the first two rows were a couple of years of the actual fund balance results, and then the proposed or the projected fund balances based on the 5-year plan, reaching 8.5 million by FY23, and then increasing over the last few years of the plan up to a peak of 10.5 million. And then the rows below that showing the comparison to previous adopted versions of the plan. If you have a color version of it printed out or on your screen, you'll see that for FY21, 22, and 23, the total fund balance projected for the end of those fiscal years meets or exceeds any of the prior, meets or exceeds the latest approved version of the plan. And then as you go out beyond FY24, it does, the projected fund balances are somewhat less than the last approved version of the plan. And then in the table just below that, it depicts all of those fund balances as a percentage of the budget as another form of measuring and comparing to the targets that the city had in previous versions of the plan. The bottom two tables show the projections for the fire fund, and you can quickly see from that that even the current fund balance exceeds any of the previous approved plans. So the fire fund, with respect to fund balance only, has sort of already met its long-term target, and there are no surpluses built into the plan for the fire fund over the 5-year planning period. But that's sort of the overview, which the Frank has probably some comments to add to that, but that's basically how this is laid out.
Thank you, Julian. And yes, if you, let's see. One thing you had noted, Madam Secretary, was the contingency amounts. If you look on page GF16 in the packet, those are the line item details. You'll see the very last line is the fund balance adjustment number that we're building in to build that surplus. Fiscal 23 is nearly $4 million, and that is the police pension payment that's coming off of the debt service. The city has decided that they want to take that money nearly in its entirety and push it into the fund balance rather than, arbitrarily mess with the mill rates. So I think the fund balances are in line relative to the last plan. Julian did note that the percentages changed a little bit. That is entirely due to the debt service. We now have built into our assumptions, or not assumptions, but projects, the Washington school needs to be completely, raised and rebuilt. So that number is in the document as well, and you can see on page GF19, it's close to the bottom, the impact in fiscal 25 from this project is just over $1.5 million. That was not in last year's plan, so as we came across these new items that's impacting the debt service, it reduced the assumption that I put in. I had hoped to get to 6.5% of expenditures, but I still think that, north of 6 is still a healthy place to be.
I think I recommend 10%, and a lot of municipalities are not there. You're only about 0.5% off, and quite frankly, I respect this fiscal discipline that you're demonstrating by taking those funds and putting them right towards fund balance to get you to that 5% threshold in fiscal 23. If you manage this budget well, your contingency won't be needed, and you will further get your fund balance in a better position. So, I think we're moving in the right direction from my perspective.
Thank you.
If you want to get to 10%, probably will get higher than 6 if you continue to manage with strong fiscal discipline.
Thank you.
I wanted to inquire about internal service fund deficits, and if there are any updates or plans for addressing these deficits. But it's another area of responsibility we have under the MARB. I know that you're working on a mitigation plan. Is there anything in here to address internal service?
No, there's not. There's not at this point. I don't have dollars around anything. One thing that we have discussed, the mayor and I have discussed, is as we start to develop the city, as you had mentioned earlier, Madam Secretary, selling the properties that the city owns to get them back on the tax record, we had discussed using the one-time revenues from the sale of those assets to either shore up the infrastructure that is so desperately needed here, as well as to put those monies towards reducing the deficit in the internal service funds.
Okay, that would be very appropriate, Frank. Did you bake in that one-time sales property revenue in this 5-year plan?
No. We don't have, I don't have any assumptions for one-time sales.
Other questions or discussion?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. With the reval, and I don't know if this was discussed tonight, listed during a previous meeting, what was the ultimate effect, plus or minus, with residential versus commercial properties?
I don't have that breakdown. Michael has it. He's just gonna run to his desk and see if he can find it.
Okay. The other question I have with regarding insurance premiums. It seems like 22 is flat funded. It's the same expenditures, 21, 977. Not having any increase in any of your premiums for liability, property, whatever lines you carry?
So which line are you looking at? Insurance, which page rather? Insurance premiums. The city insurance premiums are increasing each year on page GF 15. We are also building in increases to general liability and other losses. I think let's see, from 22 to 23, we are actually showing increases on all the health insurance lines as well. So,
Yeah, I'm just talking specifically about like liability insurance, things like that, because in 21, well, I would imagine you have, it's not a forecast anymore, you paid what you paid for 21, right, 485, 977?
well, that's still a forecast. This was built a couple of months ago, but yeah, it should roll pretty close to that. And then in 20,
And then and for fiscal 22, it's 485, 977?
still flat, and then 23 increases, and each year after that increases.
Right, but for the upcoming fiscal year, who do you guys insure with? Is it Kerma?
The standard?
Yes, Mr. Egan, Attorney Lee Kieran. We use PMA as our third-party administrator, and we have a high deductible plan. We've been very lucky. And what Frank has done is he is increasing the contingency fund so that we can look out for any difficulties in terms of the high deductible plan. The administrator puts those plans out to bid, including our insurance. And so, we feel pretty comfortable with the numbers. Anything could happen, obviously. Don't want to press my luck, but, we've had a pretty good history. And we have a risk manager in place for the last year, and she's doing a very good job in ensuring that we do more proper risk practices. So I don't anticipate large increases in this area.
Okay, so, well, PMA is your TPA for your workers' comp, right?
Correct. But also on liability.
Oh, okay, the third-party administrator for your liability.
Both, yes.
Okay. All right, so who do you actually insure with? I mean, who carries the policy for your general liability?
We are self-insured up to, I think, $2 million. And then we have, PMA puts out coverage for the overage amount, up to $10 million.
Oh, okay, you guys are completely self-insured,
Yes.
and then you buy an excess policy?
Correct.
Okay, and so that 485, 977, that's noted in the plan is for what cost? What is that? That's for your,
It would be the premiums. Yeah, the premium.
Well, the premium, but I think it's also PMA bills. So as they get a file, they'll bill whatever costs are in the file. And they might even bill if we settle a case. You're gonna jinx me because we've had an excellent claims history in the last 4 or 5 years. Actually, the best 4 or 5 years since I've had any affiliation with West Haven, so just warning you.
Call me the pessimist, I guess, I'm sorry, young lady. Okay, I just, yeah, so I would assume, especially in your access lines, because they've been so volatile for the last 12 months, 15 months, that you probably would have some type of increase that would be flat funded, so you just might want to keep an eye on that when you're working with them trying to secure that, which is probably going on right about now.
Okay, thank you.
I have the real estate information.
Oh, and Michael has the real estate information for you, sir.
Okay, great.
Pat, this is Michael. Overall, the real estate portion of Canada grew by $294 million, or about 12.9%. And I'll pick off the 3 or 4 major parts of that. The residential portion grew by 12.65%, or about $229 million. The industrial grew by about 4.7 million, or 6.65%. Apartments grew by about 21 million, or 20.34%. And the commercial grew by about $36.6 million, or also by about 12.65%. And then there are other minor elements to that, public utility, vacant land, and so on, but that makes up about 98% of the real estate grand list growth.
Was there a lot of appeals as far as people's rebound goes?
I don't know relative to other years, but I think Ali does, and he's going to address that question.
You're killing me, Pat. So, actually, we had a very, we prepared for a pretty busy season, given everything, and it has not been. We've been very, very lucky, again, abnormally low number of tax appeals.
Okay. So another thing to highlight, which is, I think the general concern is that, the market as we see it, and I think as everybody in the field anticipates, is going to soften over the next probably 12 to 18 months for a number of factors, right? I mean, there's not a lot of supply, a lot of demand going on right now. That's been going on for probably the last 10 months or so, and that's I think the market's going to tail off a little bit, and I don't know if people, when they're looking at it, because they're actually seeing real sales of properties at a higher amount, so they're comfortable with it, but as things start to decline, you might have a little more pushback on those things, and the actual valuation of properties will depress over, in the out years, and that could certainly have some effect on the grand list.
I think that's going to be delayed, Pat, because what we're finding is that the building supply chain issues are directly impacting people's ability, even the small homeowner, right up to the large plan to build. And so I think what's going to happen is what you might have been correct, but the completed projects are going to be delayed. And that means that new construction is being delayed. So there's a lot of aspects of that I think will impact the market. There won't be the hop up and the hop down. It'll be more flatline until that supply chain can get corrected. And the other thing you got to remember about West Haven, we're 10.8 square miles, so we're not impacted the same way that other communities are impacted because we just don't have as much space. We're already densely built and densely populated.
Yeah, I don't see these things happening tomorrow. I'm talking kind of 18 months down the road, but it could certainly affect the overall scope of what's mapped out as a
Are there Bob, are you jumping in there? Mr. White?
Lee, when is the next, soft reval?
Last month. Yeah, it's a 5-year cycle.
5-year cycle, okay. So you're in the out year. One other question just for the city generally. What would you be worrying about in terms of risk in this plan? And I know you put a lot of work in it and there's a lot of conservative assumptions, but what would keep you up at night?
Well, okay, I mean, obviously, oddly enough, we're in our centennial, West Haven, and come June 24th, West Haven became a city, the last act of that legislative year. West Haven will be 100 years old. And if you look at the history of West Haven, I would say that I will call it political instability is the biggest fear factor to have a dramatic change in the direction of where the city would go. But other than that, I mean, you know, our major elements, take for instance, the University of New Haven. The University of New Haven, when COVID started, you know, fearful of applications, fearful of lack of foreign students, fearful of how they were going to be impacted, not endowed like a school like Yale or even Trinity College, and yet University of New Haven came through it with an increase in applications. They're not only back on track, they're growing, they're continuing their development on campus, so, you know, that's a positive factor. And I can tell you that just in terms of, even in the last 3 weeks, just in terms of development, we're raising the road near the water, that's spurring development along the water, spurring a lot of interest in development, you know, competitive development on parcels. And the other nice feature that I've noticed in the last 3 weeks is we're going to be embarking on deals for existing businesses. People that have weathered the storm with us are now looking to expand. And let me just give you an example of how things can grow and how government, and I'll be quick, Melissa, I'm sorry, but how things can grow and things can be impacted. We're doing a $35 million redevelopment of senior housing near the water. It's a nice building, but HUD could not afford to redevelop it itself, so the Housing Authority had to create a financing structure. That, the final product of that will mean that that building will be back on the tax rolls, number one. But number two, our local contractors are going to get a lot of that business. In anticipation of that redevelopment, a local contractor, a longtime local contractor in the city, is going to expand his business, and we are going to invite him to expand onto currently city-owned property, which will now become taxable commercial real estate. And he's not the only one. I have another one who wants to expand into the new investment zone, and a third one who was already in the investment zone and wants to expand further. So I think on both levels, we're actually seeing some pretty good activity. But the other feature is the elephant in the room for all the coastal communities: climate change, where the flood lines are going to be, and you know how that's going to impact all of us. And you know, like I said, we're raising roads, we're doing what we can, but that has to be in the back of everybody's mind. West Haven's elevation levels do not increase very dramatically from the shore to about a mile in, so you know, it's something we have to always keep in mind.
One thing that I would say, Mr. White, is that, you know, the concern, as Lee said, would be the political climate. So this plan does include items such as taking the savings and debt service and putting it to the general fund rather than trying to reduce the mill rate. You know, one-time revenue usage. I think we've gotten to a position where we're not looking to use revenues from the sale of properties to try to balance the budget. That could certainly change, as we go on in time with new elected officials. On a positive note, the debt service numbers are assuming that all capital projects are being funded through general fund, not general fund, are being general bond issue. So to the extent that we can use some of the stimulus money, that the Board of Ed can use some of the federal money to pay for part of the school renovations, to pay for some of the infrastructure, that will in turn reduce the debt service. So I think as we look at some of the bigger objects, maybe something with a 15 to 20 year payoff as far as the debt goes, to try to fund those through alternate sources, that ultimately reduces not only the debt service line, but you could then turn around and use those funds to, again, reinvest in the city through maybe another new hire, bolster up some of the other departments. So we're looking at ways to not necessarily crash the mill rate, but keep it constant and still be able to increase the effectiveness of the city.
Madam?
Yes.
Frank, I do want to, for you and the mayor, I do want to commend you for definitely taking that savings in the debt service and plowing that back into fund balance to help that financial stability, and that's really important. One of the other questions that I have, while you have this laundry list of needs that are being budgeted and funded, what is the laundry list of needs that are not being budgeted? And are we staying within time, or do we have catch-up of capital needs that we're not putting our attention to?
No, I think over the last couple of years, we've kind of developed a discipline around the capital needs. So the responses that I've gotten from the department heads in the last year were more detailed than I got the year before. So they're starting to realize that the city does need to focus on what the capital needs are. And so, we do have line items in here, not as we had in the past, where just a generic replacement of vehicles, $200,000 every year. So we are looking at the overall infrastructure, not only from, IT to buildings to roads. There's a line item in here for the street lights and the traffic signals, etc. So I think, at least for myself and the mayor and some of the others, have come to the realization that West Haven has neglected itself in favor of maintaining a low artificial mill rate and keeping that mill rate down by putting off, and as any car owner knows, you could spend $70 a year for an oil change, or you can never do it and have to buy a whole new vehicle. We're at the vehicle replacement point because the regular maintenance has not been done.
Okay. Thank you. One other thing, you had mentioned that you received approval last night on the new surveillance fees for the legal instrument fees.
Conveyance fees.
Okay. So, was there something else that was approved last night, or just that?
I wasn't at the meeting last night, so I found out about that. We find out about OPEB. The OPEB trust was in the second read, I know that.
Yeah. So, we're making a modest change to the OPEB trust. That was in the second reading, and just the conveyance tax issue.
Right, that was it.
Okay.
I don't think there was anything on the agenda.
We
Your
accepted.
5-year plan has not been approved at City Council, correct?
No, it has not gone to the council yet.
Yeah, it hasn't been submitted, so.
Right. I just wanted to double check.
I didn't want to send it to the council if the subcommittee and the MARB had substantive changes to it.
Understand.
New members, we had a chance to question the city, and they've made a number of the edits that we've requested. We've analyzed risk, we've evaluated revenue assumptions, we've looked at contingency, we've studied fund balance. We recognize that the pension fund report and plan will be forthcoming shortly. I guess the question back to the members, is there anything that you see as outstanding? This plan, as I see it, certainly passes muster. I love what I'm hearing about the fiscal integrity and discipline that's being built into your decisions, particularly while the internal service funds are not addressed, you have a plan to use one-time revenue. You do not take that into your 5-year plan. Everything that I'm hearing is all the signs of sound financial practices, and shows your commitment towards long-term sustainability. So with that, I guess, committee members, is there anything that you see here as missing that you want to provide to the city in terms of feedback?
Can I make a comment?
Of course.
Yes, that was me, so we can include the financial data.
And I have to say, I agree with you. I commend the city for the strides that they've made since I've been on the commission. I do agree with Mr. Egan on a couple things, and I know that you can't really, I hate to look at this as a business guy, but that's kind of what I do. And this is just my, I don't really need an answer from anything, this is just my observations. It just means that I wonder if there is a drop in property values, or if some of these development programs that they have, or commitments that they have, if they don't cross the finish line, how quickly is the city able to mitigate the change? I still have a problem, though I think the 5-year plan is a great step in the direction that we need to get to. I'm still very uncomfortable, and I know we have more information coming, but since I've gotten on this committee, the fire districts, or the control of the fire districts and their pensions have been a problem. And I just hope that at some point, we can really get their arms around it and tackle it and not punt. And I think that that's important. Some of the other things from a macro observation to a micro observation is we had a to-do list probably a year ago, and I haven't seen an update on that. And know we've talked about it and it's been touched upon. But some of those micro issues that had to be fixed were never finished. They were working on them, but they hadn't been finished. And I think it's important that the city circles back to that and finishes that list and gets it complete. And the reason I say that is because the things that were on that macro list were the nuts and bolts of running the business. And it's that policy in many departments that needs to be adhered to, so that we don't fall back into an issue over the next 5 years. I'm sure the city doesn't want to be back on MARB in 5 years. They want to be off MARB and they want to be on their own. And I think some of those nuts and bolts that have to be fixed and have to be adhered to, and there have to be policies set for, and department heads held to certain criteria. I think it's very, very important that that's established and finished. And those are just my observations. I don't really get an answer from the city. It's just my observation, in my opinion.
No, I think that's valid feedback, and thank you for that. Just to touch on the pension for the fire departments, in the Allentown plan, which is the only pension that the city really has control over, we do have additional contributions to the pension and to OPEB over and above the anticipated ADEC. And that is coming from the funds that were secured for us by Representative DeMassa. So again, rather than drop the mill rate there, we did drop the mill rate a little bit, but certainly we don't want to ignore the elephant in the room that is, a severely underfunded pension plan.
And I certainly understand that that's something that you inherited, it's not something that you created. I just think that has to be on the forefront of
of your
Yeah,
commitment.
I
I
agree.
think that's really important, because that, you know, if that goes in the wrong direction, that could affect, that could probably hurt a lot of your, a large section of the 5-year plan, I would think.
Yes.
From a different way.
I understand that for Allentown, you'll have evaluation in July, but you could do some soft modeling of scenarios and make adjustments to the Allentown Fire District plan to reflect what would be necessary funded status of the plan. Steve just raised a good point that it's kind of missing here. The mill rate increases that you show on ASC 1 are quite modest. That would be one area to strengthen this 5-year plan, at least for the district that you're responsible for and you have control over.
Sure, we can work up some what-if scenarios.
Great.
And to Secretary, to piggyback off of Stephen's comment, I think it's also important to note that the initial plan, if they were not reporting to the MARB, did not include some of these adjustments for Allentown. We had to push the envelope to make that happen. Secretary, you did do that, and that's when the mill rate increased. So that I would have hoped they would have done on their own, not needing our pressure to make that happen.
Thank you, Kim. Other discussion or comments? I think, David, you're hearing directly that there are concerns that the discipline that's in the general fund needs to be bolstered in the Allentown Fire Fund 5-year plan. That would be important to get this over the finish line. So, how soon do you think you'll be able to turn that back around?
I mean, I could put some what-if scenarios, but the fund is a fairly modest fund. There aren't too many line items in there that are volatile. So I could certainly try to get something for you by the end of the week.
Districts and then react to that.
Michael Mylone has suggested that perhaps we wait until we get the fire plan and we can see all 3 districts. But if I don't want to...
Did you put the date up? It's May 30th?
It's May 30th that it's due.
May 30th it's due.
Okay.
As a requirement to the MOI.
Well, committee, if this is a material component, then we would have to have a special meeting to review the 5-year plan with the updates to Allentown Fire. Obviously, it was our intention to get the 5-year plan to the full MARB, and we typically would vote contingent on approval by the council. So if that is the case, if that's the way we'd like to proceed, then we would delay a vote today, have the city update the plan to reflect additional improvements in the Allentown Fire, schedule a special meeting for the West Haven subcommittee to review those changes, see if it passes muster to vote it out to get it to the full board. It might not be done in time for our next full board meeting. I mean, obviously, the city has our approval of the budget, contingent upon the outcome of the state budget, so it doesn't harm you to be able to operate for July 1.
Actually, Madam Secretary, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe that the approval that was voted on was that the budget would be approved contingent on the 5-year plan, not on the state. So I'm concerned that I won't be able to get the tax bills out if we go past the next MARB meeting. I'll just have to go back. I can go back and check the minutes and see what's out there, but I think it was contingent on the 5-year plan.
Okay, if that's the case, then you would have to have a special meeting for MARB to approve this 5-year plan. What is your time frame for, how long would it take for your council to approve, given you have not yet submitted to council? Just curious, is that a 4 to 6 week process for you?
I don't think so. It's 3 weeks until the next council meeting, so we'll get it on the agenda for then.
Yeah, but it's.
But they don't need to approve the 5-year plan necessarily to send
They're
out.
trying to see what, do they get their own fingerprints on
Oh.
your plan?
I agree, I agree.
Great. Your deadline for getting tax bills out, if we had to do a small special meeting a week after our current MARB, full board meeting, we could still get tax bills out.
I'd have to check with the tax department to see how much time they need.
We have early taxation payments.
Okay.
But we normally try to get about, early June so that we can get the early payments coming in.
And that's figured in.
Well, we have our full MARB meeting is on Thursday, June 10th.
Okay.
So,
That's gonna be too
the
late.
extent that that plan is submitted on May 30th, the first business day thereafter is Monday, May 31st, we can certainly put a special meeting on the calendar to review your updated plan for Allentown. If you're prepared to do so, I think you should prepare to do that, and so that we can actually take action on it, assuming the committee is comfortable, and vote this out in time for the June 10th full MARB meeting.
Okay.
We do have to get a meeting, posted and adhere to those requirements, but if you commit to a certain date, we can certainly get our quorum in place to review your update.
Well, yes, and as I said, it's a smaller model. There aren't too many moving pieces. The only line item I'll be playing with is the pension number. And so by the end of the week, I should be able to pull something together for you. Now, the other thing to note in Allentown is there are no assumptions for additional tier monies that would be going to the Allentown Fire Department.
Right.
But there is tier money that is planned.
That's already been secured.
But you're saying it's not in your plan, or it's in
No,
your plan?
I have that in there, but we have been told that that number would potentially go up quite a bit. And so we did not layer that in.
Well, here's what I would suggest for us to proceed, that the West Haven special meeting, be scheduled around the 8th or thereabouts. It's very close to or the 7th, where bills are already being run. We'll have a better computer urgency on what that potentially looks like for the tier pilot and the fiscal impact. But it is incumbent on you to go back and take a look at least your latest valuation or your most recent century report, and look at the funded status and the investment rate of return, the extent to which you've been hitting it, and sure in your inspections, you have a sense, or you can talk with your actuaries about the direction it's headed. Use soft modeling, even though it's not based on the latest experience study, to get a sense of if you were to move the needle on the assumed rate of return, or to improve funded status by X percentage points over a period of time, what is the fiscal impact? And leave the committee essentially to show progress towards that goal and a plan that demonstrates the commitment to making that progress. And in the meantime, we will continue to negotiate a final budget and certainly update you as we have bills drafted and they'll start to work their way through the vote chamber. So by that date, there should be a little bit more certainty.
Does that timetable work for the city in terms of
No.
getting the 5-year plan to the
No.
council?
It works for
I mean,
nothing.
my own view is, I'd like to see, the results of that soft modeling. I don't foresee a situation where, at least I would say, I'm going to vote down this 5-year plan and therefore settle the budget. I think it is good additional information, which quite frankly is going to be tweaked yet again after they get the study. So I just don't want to interfere with them getting this to the council. I don't know how other, I don't know how the secretary feels or others feel, but.
Approved by the council before we can reduce our tax bills. That's
What were the city's intentions today? Were you intending to get this through council and have it approved? I mean,
Yes.
alternatively, you can update the Ellington Fire Department, you can have a special meeting earlier than that. I don't see that as a heavy lift. If Frank is indicating he can do it in a matter of days, then he should do that, to respect the other committee's members' feedback, and we get in the room, review it, and favorably vote out the 5-year plan. So why don't we agree today that a special meeting needs to be scheduled, and let's have the team work offline with Frank to see how fast he can update Allentown and how quickly we can get a special meeting scheduled.
The tax department has texted up and saying that the latest they need to get the bills out would be June 1st. So we were expecting to go out next week because West Shore Fire is the last mill rate we were waiting for. They vote on theirs this weekend.
Well, the next full MARB meeting was set scheduled for June 10th. So I had this couple of Eric's section of,
We have what do you mean we have, I'm sorry, Madam Secretary, what problem did we have?
We're clearly intending to go out with the tax bills on June 1st prior to the approval of the 5-year plan because the MARB meeting was not scheduled until June 10th.
Well, I would agree with that.
Yes, that would still have been a problem, yes.
So in any event, then I think the plans don't, the plans should remain as just discussed. We'll update the Allentown Fire at the request of the committee, and we will schedule a special meeting before the full council and review that plan. I would hope that it would be favorably reported out and that it would go to full council and scheduled for June 10th.
Okay?
All right.
I just have I just heard something, and I just want to make sure I heard it right. So, you have to send the bills out, or your tax department needs to have the bills available to go out as of June 1, but you're waiting for the finalization of the mill rate for the fire business?
No, June-
To vote on for this weekend?
June 1st would be when they would send all the information and the final documents to the printer to get everything ready as well.
Right, but you were saying that you have a vote on a mill rate in the fire district this weekend?
This weekend in the West Shore
What if it
district.
got voted, so let me ask you a question, maybe I'm just a little confused. What if it got voted down? What do you do then?
Then, according to the, I guess bylaws would be the wrong word, but if the public votes down the mill rate, the charter, thank you. If the public votes down the mill rate, the old budget immediately takes effect again.
Yeah, the West Shore Fire District cannot not have a budget.
So, I mean, is there, and maybe it's just me, but is there a reason why we always seem to be pushed up against these deadlines? Is there any way to maybe
I'm not staying for the meeting afterwards.
forward think? Maybe that, or maybe there just isn't any other way because it's, you know, that, we didn't have work, I don't know.
Many of the deadlines are prescribed in charter, but West Haven is not unique in this regard. Even in that they have a time frame in which they can submit their budget, and we redo the review, the time frame it takes for them to complete a 5-year plan. It is nuanced, quite frankly. It's worse than when you have a state budget that contemplates municipal aid and there's a lack of clarity. So, and it's a long session. So therefore, we don't have.
We have this oversimplifying it, I apologize for that.
Our budget of $7 million of cash flow. It's nonsense.
Government. It is.
Well, that's not home.
I couldn't do it, you guys did.
Cash flow. Or that's what I say, cash flow. That's what I say, cash flow. There's gonna be cash flow.
Nimble. Run fast.
You guys do, I give you a lot of credit, I listen to you, I give a lot of credit, I really do.
You've done a good, great job pulling this together. You've made so much progress in the past couple of years. So we'll get this to the finish line, and our team will work with you, Frank, on the Allentown piece to give any clarity and guidance.
Great.
The jury gets that in, and we will get our special meeting scheduled immediately so we can meet the posting and notice requirements.
I think what I'll do, Madam Secretary,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to say that what I'll do is, I'll try to work something up, kind of not a finalized, but kind of where my thoughts are by tomorrow, and send that to Julie and Kim to see if that's kind of where they were thinking the model needs to go, and then I can put the finishing touches on it.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you all for our engaging discussion on the 5-year plan. I believe the next item is an update on the corrective action plan. I do have to, leave you with Ms. Tennyson and the rest of the committee.
What are you saying, Roddy? Spring meeting. This is a short meeting.
Thank you, Secretary. So, regarding the corrective action plan, to my knowledge, we did not receive any kind of written update in the corrective action plan. So, is that accurate, Frank?
That's correct.
Okay.
I didn't have time, I mean, we're moving, the new purchasing person is in place, full-time now. And he has been going and kind of shadowing the old purchasing person, who has been kind enough to devote some time to training, etc. So we are moving forward with that.
The mayor's status report will be to them June 1st, which will have a lot of this
And
information.
Michael just mentioned that the mayor's status report will be sent to you on June 1st, which would cover a lot of this information in more detail.
On the corrective action plan?
Some of the items in the corrective action plan which affect your
Some of
status.
Okay, so some of the items in the corrective action plan.
Not the detail of the audit.
Okay. But I just want to be clear going forward, because I feel like I'm banging my head up against the wall sometimes, and that is that, this should be something that is standard that we should just get with our packet with the monthly financial reports. And so I'm hoping as you get people in place that this doesn't become that I have to keep asking for it, and I sound like a broken record, and nobody likes that sound of a broken record, and I don't like to be the broken record. So I am asking that gets presented to us on a monthly basis. If you don't have the staff to do that, Frank, then I guess my guess would be, when will you have the staff to make sure that you can provide that on a regular basis?
No, I'll make sure that that's included as the last page of the monthly financial report.
Thank you, Frank.
No problem.
Other business, we have, I'm wondering if some potential discussion that we could have, or is there a plan that is beginning to be built regarding, I know we discussed it at the last meeting of ARPA funds, and I know that you didn't have all of the restrictions around that, but to begin to build the thought process of what you would do with some of those funds, even to get pen to paper, is helpful. I'm wondering if that work has been started at all, or if any kind of thoughts about that, Mayor.
Go ahead, Mike.
This is Michael, and what we've done, Kim, is I've gotten a lot of help from Julian in terms of just understanding what the regulations allow and don't allow. So with his help and my summary report, I apprised the mayor and Frank just late last week of the possible uses and the means for hopefully maximizing the use of those resources. But other than that, no, we haven't sat down and identified specific things, but from past information that we've conveyed, obviously, and I can't speak for the mayor, but one area that we'd certainly like to address would be the unfunded liabilities. The second area, which Frank touched on earlier, is the infrastructure and all of the neglected maintenance. And obviously, to the extent possible, restoration of monies that were spent on COVID that could be restored. So we have three general areas. Also, we gave you a list of how we're going to deal with the internal service funds. which is, again, the unfunded liabilities. And that's all part of what's going to go into this process. But no, we haven't developed a list of priorities yet and put amounts next to them. And again, I think we still want to wait and get a little bit more information and confirmation of especially the use of revenue loss and how broad that might be able to be applied to some of these needs. But I know it's urgent, and that kind of falls on my plate, and I recognize the importance of moving that along so that the mayor has something to put in place so that she can better control her destiny.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So we will look forward to getting some of these updates. That's the last item that I had for today's meeting. I guess one other thing would be the ADP project. I think that you said you went live with that, or did you have any kind of issues, any kind of follow-up, or are things running smoothly?
No, everything's running smoothly with that.
Okay. All right, then, unless any of the members have any other discussion items today, please let me know. Otherwise, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Enjoy your vacation.
All in favor? Hold on, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Enjoy your vacation.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, all.
All right, we'll be in touch, Frank, and have a good day, everyone.
You too. Bye.
Yeah, shut that off. Shut that